And we're live. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Ariel here. I have a great guest for you today, and we're going to get started in just a few moments. We're going to let people shuffle in and get their tea ready. We're actually starting on time, which has not happened in the last few streams. To my knowledge, no technical difficulties so far, and I did knock on wood. Microphone is working, no one is muted.
Can you hear me as well?
And we can hear you as well. I believe, at least. If you can't hear Antoine, let us know in the chat.
Would be a lonely chat, isn't it?
And as per tradition, while we wait for people to shuffle in, let me know what's in your cup, what you're drinking, or your bottle, and where you're from. I'm drinking some Earl Grey tea in an Appfigures mug, and I'm here in, I think, sunny New York City. The blinds are closed. But it's a nice day. Yesterday was pretty weird and rainy.
It's better than the hot temperatures that we have in Europe. It's
what do you have right now?
Well, it's okay right now, but the past week it was like 30 to 40 degrees. If you're living in Amsterdam in a small apartment or such, I'm not, by the way, but I've heard stories from colleagues. Pretty bad.
Yeah, I can imagine. I heard about a lot of fires and other things that are not pleasant. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
40 degrees is a lot of degrees Celsius, that is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, indeed, it's pretty hot. Yeah.
That's crazy. Global warming at all.
Yeah, that's what they say. But it's funny, those maps with temperatures,
mm-hmm.
If you compare them to a few years back, the same temperatures weren't as red on the map as they are today. So they kind of like try to make you think it's hot, more hot than it used to be as well. So
I never actually thought about that or noticed it. But yeah, I mean, so I've been doing my newsletter for almost 2 years now, 2+ years. And I make a lot of charts. I make 5 different charts every week. And I realize that you change a few little things in a chart and you totally change perception of specific data sets, or like you can take one chart and make it red and it would look like it's a bad thing. Make it green, it will look awesome. Same shape.
Yeah, that's what colors do, right? Like, do you know that I've been told that the yellow color is the first color a human sees? And so if you're in a shop and you see something yellow, it's often like a sale or something, right? And then they combine it with the color red, which is impulsive. So it's great that we're still in the introduction, right? And it's allowed to get calls.
Exactly.
But no, I mean, the red color will be impulsive, so you're more likely to buy anything. It's pretty crazy.
That makes a ton of sense and explain a lot of things.
Right?
Ooh, we have people from Portugal in the chat. Argentina is in the chat. Thailand is in the chat. I see Frank in the chat too. If you're just joining us now, let us know what's in your cup, what you're drinking, and where you're from. My cup is backwards. We're going to fix that. And we'll give everyone a moment or two to shuffle in, and then we'll get started.
I got a pretty cheesy cup today. That's what you get if your fiance is into those weird cups.
I actually like weird cups. It makes everything a little bit more exciting. I have a bunch of weird cups that I don't actually use on this, but in general, in life. And I drink a lot of tea, so if you drink a lot of tea from the same cup every time, you just get bored.
Yeah, no, true. You don't drink any coffee?
I also drink coffee. I got into espresso over the over COVID lockdowns, so I have everything at this point. But tea is still my go-to.
And are you more like into whiskey or beer?
Whiskey, for sure. I had my beer phase for a little bit. One of my friends was really into beer, made me a beer snob, and I liked it for a little bit, and then I didn't anymore. And then I've been doing whiskey ever since.
Gotcha. Well, let me know if you're around in the Netherlands, and I'll taste you some beer, from the Netherlands, from Belgium.
Oh, that would be cool. Belgian beers are the best, obviously, but yeah. I really need to make a trip pretty much anywhere. I have not traveled since COVID started. I have a conference appearance in Denver in a few weeks, or like a month or something like that. And after that, hopefully it's going to be international again. I miss traveling.
Yeah, it's so much fun, especially in-person conferences, to meet like-minded people and stuff.
Yeah.
It's super inspiring. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for in-person conferences. I almost forgot how good it is just because I have not done it.
What is the conference you're speaking at, just for the audience?
Oh, for the audience, I like helping me promote myself.
Yeah, I know it.
I will be speaking at 360 iDev, an indie conference for iOS developers that I've been attending since, I think, 2010. And it's a really good conference, really good people, small, so you actually get to make friends and have meaningful conversations across the entire period of the conference, morning, evening sessions, the whole thing. It's definitely recommended. And this year I'm doing 2 talks, not just one. I have not done 2 talks in one conference in a long time, so that's a lot of slides to make.
You did that before?
Yeah.
Oh, that's insane.
Or I've done multiple conferences in the same conference week. Around WWDC, there would be a ton of different conferences in the same place. So I would do multiple talks at those conferences, but not at the same conference.
No, yeah, exactly. That surprises me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they were all picked not at random. They were picked without knowing who the speaker is, just off of the title. So I guess people really want to learn about subscriptions and about App Store optimization.
So you submitted 2 talks?
I submitted 4, but normally I get 1. I always have stuff to talk about. And people really want to hear about search ads and about ratings and about App Store optimization, about trends and about competitive intelligence.
Right.
And I can't merge them all into one chat. There's just too many things.
So it could have been that you had like 4 talks to get there. Oops.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. There's a side story short about WWDC when you had the lottery, right? You get a ticket.
Yep.
So my previous company signed up with 7 engineers because they were like, yeah, chances are so low. We get a ticket either way, right?
Yeah.
And they ended up getting about 6 tickets. So they had to pay those tickets and all those engineers had to go. Yeah. Quite expensive.
Oh, definitely. But at least that sounds like fun. It sounds like people get to enjoy it. WWDC is just an amazing, or used to be an amazing experience. I'm looking forward to seeing what would happen next year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I decided to go there no matter what, probably.
Yeah.
I've been told it was super fun this year either way. It's shorter, less parties and such, but still, there's so many people from the community that you want to meet.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I miss the most about it. And speaking of the community, I think it's time to kick this off and talk about competing on the App Store and the one number most people really don't think about when it comes to competition. Competition with App Store optimization, something I talk about very often, and something that has to do with people, which I also talk about somewhat often, I would say. Today's guest is Antoine. Antoine, tell us some more about yourself and why you're here.
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so my name is Antoine van der Lee. I'm a staff iOS engineer at WeTransfer for about 5 years already now. People might know me from my blog called SwiftLee. I write there every week. Not long ago, when we had the introduction call together, I had my 200th article, which meant 200 weeks of articles writing, quite crazy. Yeah, SwiftLee comes together with a newsletter I send out every week. And I write about all kinds of things, including how to get more ratings on an iOS app. So that's quite a coincidence for this meeting today, I guess. Yeah, and some side projects. Yeah, well, yeah. And some side projects. I got RocketSim, a developer tool, and stock analyzer to help you find the right stocks to buy. So quite some different kinds of interests, and really happy to be here today.
You keep busy when it comes to apps.
Yeah, I'm quite into apps, you can tell.
That's good. That's good. And some of us have been subscribed to your newsletter for a long time, even before we started chatting a while back, which is really incredible. It's always nice when you meet someone behind the newsletter. So
yeah, it's pretty insane. Yeah, it grew quite rapidly lately. It's super cool.
That's great. I think at the end of the day, you have this, there's so much wisdom and insight out there, and it's tough to find it because a lot of people just use content to promote whatever it is that they do. Not a lot of people put content out there to help people actually do stuff. And when you find good stuff, you have to share it. And that's normally what I come across in your newsletter. So it's great. If you are not a subscriber to Antoine's newsletter, please check it out. There should be a link in the description. If there isn't, there will be one, or in the chat very soon, so you can do that. And people in the chat are actually saying that it's great. And someone is thanking you for your core data advanced tutorial. Helped us a lot.
Yeah, I know what he's talking about. That was quite a journey that I shared. Yeah.
So that's great. So we're going to talk today about ratings. If the many emails that I sent and the many tweets that we had did not make it clear, because ratings are incredibly important for pretty much everyone. Apple's App Store search algorithm uses ratings as a way to know if your app matters, if anyone should care about it, and people use it as a way to see if other people care about it. So no ratings, problem. Yes, ratings, great. And there are a lot of different ways to go about getting more ratings once you start thinking, oh, I should get more of those. That's really going to help me. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how to do it. There's one thing that you have to do. You just must do. And if you don't, you're in trouble. And then once you do that, there are ways to optimize it and ways to figure out if you're doing it right. And then there are little tricks that we've picked up along the way, whether it's when to reset your ratings or what not to do when it comes to ratings. And we're going to talk about those as well. So let's kick this off by talking about why ratings really matter. And they do matter to the algorithm because if you think about it, there's really no other metric out there that's visible to everyone that shows momentum, that shows popularity, that shows if people actually like your app. And be it people or the algorithm, ratings just say, well, people care about this. They not only downloaded the app, they also left a rating. One of the questions that I get very often is, do ratings matter in terms of positive ratings versus negative ratings? And the answer is no. It's the number of ratings. And I have shown many, many times in my keyword teardown series that even a low average rating will get you ahead if you have more. So the goal really is to get more people to give their opinion really on your app. And Antoine, have you seen this kind of happen the same way for you and the apps you work on?
Yeah, actually, I've seen it several times, right? So it's actually funny. If I look at WeTransfer right now, we built a great application over the past few months, and the one thing that we got back from feedback was from the executive team that was looking into the App Store, and they saw that the App Store rating was too low for their perspective, right? So yeah, I've had several experiences with multiple apps where we optimized the rating, and I think the first time I did it was back when I think it was 2013 or 14. It was quite early on already, but at the time, we already saw quite a huge impact of optimizing the whole flow around ratings. And yeah, the results, I guess everyone that uses Appfigures and looks at the rating reports knows what it kind of has for impact. And yeah, I guess we're going to dive into it in more detail now.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the things that I've been noticing over the last, I would say, even year or so, is that ratings have become even more important when it comes to App Store optimization. They were always important, again, because they are the one thing that everyone can see. But over the last, I would say, 6 months, maybe 8 months, they become the key component of App Store optimization. You do your keywords right, you do your ratings right, and you win. And it's that simple. There is a new keyword teardown that just got released earlier this morning, my morning, and it shows pretty much the same thing. It's keyword placement and ratings, keyword placement and ratings. And the one easy way to get more ratings is to ask for them. And that's kind of where we start our journey today in how to get more ratings. So Antoine actually has a whole guide on how to ask for ratings, the technical implementation that I saw fairly recently. Kick us off with, how do you ask for ratings?
Yeah, so I think a little background story on why I started writing the article as well is, I think we all know that journey that you open an application, for example, a weather app, right? You want to quickly see whether it starts to rain in a bit or not. And you open the app and then suddenly there's a pop-up like, what do you think about the app? Do you like it or not? And then you're like, no, I just want to see the weather. So you say like, no, I don't like the app, because you just want to get rid of the pop-up. And then you get like a feedback form. Can you tell us what you don't like about the app? And you're like, no, I want to see the weather, right? Like, it's quite annoying, and it will be quite a bad way of getting feedback, right? Because you get a lot of indications that users don't like your app, but do they actually don't like your app, or were they just annoyed by the pop-up?
Yep.
It's quite an interesting question to ask yourself, which is why we looked at optimizing this whole flow at WeTransfer in such a way that we try to indicate whether the user is at a moment that is likely to place a rating. And you can do that in several ways. So let me take you through the implementation that we have at WeTransfer, which is actually based out of 3 scenarios, and I'll just follow up with one. So if you open the transfer application, you might want to send a transfer, right? So we're not going to interrupt that flow because you're here to send a transfer. But once you're done with the transfer, it might very well be that you still have some time left to place a rating. So at that moment, we kind of like trigger the flow. We verify if you, as a user, have been using the app for more than 7 days, because otherwise it might be your first experience. You don't really know yet whether the app is nice. Whereas if it's the 7th time, it means that you came back 7 times. So you probably like the app, right? Because you came back to it. All those kind of like conditions are combined together and increase the chance that 1, you want to place a rating, but 2, that it's also likely that you place a positive rating. Yeah, and altogether, if I look at the numbers, we launched last year, October, and all the way to January, we had 448 ratings with an average of 3.67, which we found too low. And then we released an app update with the implementation that I just described. And 3 months later, we had 11,799 ratings with an average of 4.57.
Wow, that is massive. That is just
massive.
Incredible. There's confetti on the screen because it's such a massive number. So 400 to 11,000.
Yeah, well, yeah, say 12,000. Yeah.
12,000. I was rounding down because the numbers were so big anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And the funny thing to me is that we didn't get less negative ratings, but because the number of positive ratings were so higher, the whole perspective of the outcome of the rating look much better. And not only from a user perspective, but also from a company perspective, where we as iOS engineers got kind of like feedback on. So yeah, it's quite positive.
That makes a lot of sense. I think ultimately, as soon as you ask if your app is good, and obviously you want to make apps that are good, then why would you get a negative rating?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, like we're going to dive more into timing in a bit, but you have to be aware that you can't ask for ratings all the time, right? Like if that was possible, you could just spam users endlessly until you get that positive rating.
Yeah. And that used to happen back in the day before the Apple original built-in pop-up was available. And I think that's why it's no longer possible to do that.
No, in fact, it's for an engineer, it's quite frustrating because the API for it is so simple. You can't configure anything. You can't get any feedback. You don't even know whether the user saw the pop-up. You know, like it's quite limited.
So for those of you who haven't implemented this API yet, you can ask for a rating up to 3 times in 1 year, 365-day period. And you can ask as much as you'd like, but it's only going to be shown 3 times maximum per user. So you really have to time it. And Antoine said we'll get into timing, and this is another reason why timing is so important. It's not just because you want to find the perfect moment for the person to actually engage, but you also, if you do it too many times, you're done. And then you lose a very, very useful resource in advancing your app forward. So one of the questions in the chat from Carlos, I'm rephrasing this, but said that it's very difficult to time it, and it really depends on the app, which I'm completely in agreement with. I think you have to really know your users, and in most of my AF chats, when I talk about keywords, when I talk about everything else, it really boils down to knowing what your users want and what your users go through and how your users actually use your app, and this is no different. And you mentioned that you knew there was this time after the transfer, and that makes perfect sense. So 2 questions. One is, can you tell us more about WeTransfer, just so we have an idea for what the app does in case the audience is not familiar. And two, if we wanted to generalize the sort of timing ideology of how do you build the right strategy for timing, because it's going to be different for your app. How would you approach that, and how did you approach that with WeTransfer?
Yeah, sure. So WeTransfer is a file transferring system, basically mostly for larger files, right? So you can upload files, any kinds of files, and send them to an email address or create a link for it. And then other users can use that link to download the files, either from their desktop or through the app. So the main two functionalities in the app are receiving and sending. And if you take that into account, we have the send flow. And if that's done, that's a moment for us to trigger the App Store rating if the user wasn't asked before, this app version as well. But the same with receiving. The question is a really good one, right? Like, how do you time the right moment? How do you know whether the user is likely to have time to place the rating? How do you know that the user is likely to give a positive rating, right? It depends on your app, but there are a few smart techniques that you can apply. And one that I particularly like is set a timer. So you can basically dispatch the ask for rating pop-up for 2 seconds, which means that the user should stop doing any user interaction for 2 seconds before the pop-up shows up. It relates maybe a bit to the exit pop-ups that you see on websites, which are quite annoying. But I guess this one might be more relevant in this case because the user is actually still in your app. He didn't move away from it and he stopped to read something or, either way, he's ready to do something else. And that might be a good moment to show the pop-up. I guess another tip I want to give is what I call significant events. So my Rocket Sim application got this implemented as well, obviously. And what I do there is I try to determine like active users, but also happy users. So that's based on their session count. So how often did they use the app, as well as how many significant events did they perform. And for Rocket Sim tries to enable developers to create a recording of the simulator, for example. Well, that's quite a significant event, I would say. Or delete derived data. For developers listening, they probably know what that means. Could be quite a significant event. And if that significant event count comes up to 10, the user had 7 or 8 sessions, and it's likely that the user has time to place a review. That's the moment that I show the pop-up. So it's definitely a case-per-case thing to explore. But yeah, I would suggest to just try it out and see how your ratings improve, and maybe do even like experiments or A/B testing if that's a capability that you've got implemented.
I think you touched on a really good point, testing. So there are all these different strategies, and I really like the idea of looking for that moment after something good happened, after that happy minute, that happy event, or after a certain number of happy events. But ultimately, it's possible that your users might not perceive the events the way you perceive the events, or that you are timing them a little bit incorrectly. And that's why testing is so important. A/B testing is really tough when it comes to something like ratings because you're so limited with the 3 pop-ups. But if you have that capability, that's great. There are companies that offer third parties, or you can build it yourself, your own pop-up that says, are you happy right now? And if you say yes, then they take you to it. I don't necessarily love those myself personally as a user. Have you experimented with that or thought about that? What are your thoughts on something like this?
Yeah, so there is a huge benefit to it, right? Like if you first show your own pop-up and the user is not in the right moment to give you a review, they close your pop-up, but not the one from Apple, right?
Exactly.
So you're not throwing away one of those 3 times that you have to show that rating pop-up. And I don't have the numbers because you won't get a callback whether or not the rating pop-up was shown.
Yeah.
You won't get a callback whether the user placed the rating, let alone what kind of rating they placed. That would be super nice, but we don't get any of that.
Yeah.
But I believe that if you press like, yes, I want to rate, say that's a simple alert asking the user like, do you want to place a rating? The user taps yes. It's very likely that they then will also use the pop-up being shown to the user. I also want to take this opportunity to let you know, like, try to keep track of that count yourself as well, right? Like if you asked the user with the actual rating pop-up from Apple 3 times, you shouldn't show that pre-alert anymore to the user, because you know for sure that he won't get the actual rating pop-up from Apple, right? So that will be kind of weird user experience, and
that is
you
a great
annoy the
point.
user.
That is a great
point.
point.
You have to think about it.
Yeah, that's a little like, I never thought about this. By the way, if you thought this was also a great point, give this video a like. We're on YouTube. We're optimizing for the algorithm. If you like this, give it a, if you're still here, give it a like. And
is this a rating pop-up, Ariel?
There is no ratings pop-up, unfortunately. I wish I could press a button and then, do you like this? Let us know. We can put a poll in the chat. Do you like this? Yes or no? But I don't really want to know about the no's, so we're not going to do that. So a few questions that came in from the chat. One from a little bit ago, it wasn't really a question, but someone mentioned that while you can only pop up the pop-up 3 times, you can still provide a link to the App Store for the user to provide a rating that will work all the time. And that is true. That will always work. The friction on getting people from your app to the App Store, leaving the experience that you've built for them and really crafted, is not, I think, a positive. So you should really optimize for the pop-up. And then a follow-up to that ish, several people have asked if you can rely on the fact that if you ask Apple to raise the pop-up and you have now maxed out, that they will pop it up at the time you ask for it, or if it will happen later or at some point.
Yeah, so I believe there is a system-wide setting for users to disable it altogether. So it could still mean that they won't get it. And you're never entirely sure that it's being shown. So it's also like kind of a black hole. It's not entirely known when it's gonna shown, but I believe, you know, like if you optimize the flow and you didn't ask before, the chances are pretty high that it will be shown.
Yeah,
I guess. Well, if I at least look at the numbers from WeTransfer, it's been shown to quite some users at least. Yeah, I think the other point you mentioned, right, like the link to the App Store, is a pretty good one. It's also good to state that the technique that we are talking about is really like an in-app experience, right?
Yep.
So there is like a native alert shown to the user, and they only have to press like the 5 stars, and the rating is done. So it's a super lean way to get ratings, and the user doesn't have to do much for it. Whereas otherwise, they will go out of the app flow, they go into the App Store, and that user experience is out of your control. What I like to do is still to, in the settings page, I always have a link to that page.
Yeah.
So, you know, place a review, actually really asking for a review rather than just a rating. And I guess the negative thing is that you might get more negative reviews because you make it easier to post negative feedback if something isn't working.
Yeah.
And that's more intent for users to post a negative review. But it's also a way to get feedback from your users, then optimize your app and potentially make a higher chance that you get a positive rating. So yeah, I would totally suggest to do that at the very least.
I completely agree. It's good to have. It never hurts. Now, we started talking about testing and about iterating, and one of the metrics that I talk about in keyword teardowns fairly often is the downloads to ratings ratio, or ratings to downloads ratio. And that is a very, very simplistic metric, but it's also something everyone can calculate on their own and on competitors. So you can tell if your app is actually extracting as many ratings as possible, or also put it in perspective when compared to your closest competitors who might be doing a better job. And then maybe you can learn from them and see what's going on. Have you used this sort of a metric when optimizing WeTransfer's ratings?
Well, in all honesty, I didn't. But what I do, so I've got my personal OKRs, and one of them was to get the rating up, and then afterwards that was to keep the rating high, right?
Yep.
And for that, I basically use the overview page on Appfigures, which shows like the number of new ratings, and then I dive into the rating report. That's really like my source of metrics. I never really compared it to the downloads, to be honest, because I guess from an engineering perspective, I mostly just mattered about the outcome average rating, and as long as that's high enough, then for me that's kind of like the end, right? Yeah.
That makes total sense. And many of the developers that I talk to kind of focus on this. I want the highest average and I want the highest count. And I think that makes sense. If you're building an app that you're proud of, whether it's for your own app because you're an indie or a side hustle, or because you're working for a company and you really like the app that you're working on, which you should. That should be the goal. But when you optimize for the algorithm, you're really competing against hopefully other people who really like the apps they're working on. And so what I like to always look at is just look at the last 30 days of new ratings in one country, the country I'm optimizing for, usually the US for me, and divided by the number of new downloads for me, for my competitors using download estimates. And that gives me an idea of how well my app is at converting a new download to a rating. Now, I know the new downloads aren't always who rates, and this is not a perfect metric because there are many issues with it. It's possible someone who downloaded the app last year, used it for the second time this time, saw the pop-up and rated, but it gives you a rough understanding of what's going on. And in most cases, you will see that apps with a higher multiple can do a lot better in ranks because they don't need as many downloads, and downloads don't play as big of a role for search engine optimization. I mean, App Store optimization, but ratings do. Someone in the chat said we should add this as a metric, and we are. So soon you will see it. For now, you can overlay the downloads and the ratings in the same chart, and you'll see if they're going together or if one is moving higher than the other. So that's that. Now, another interesting question that I get often is, should you somehow incentivize users to leave a rating? And there are many ways to do that, but should you to begin with?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I would say yes, because the many positive reasons that we mentioned in this whole chat altogether, right? Like,
yep.
To me, it's really obvious that you should. But if you, I could think about scenarios where you wouldn't yet, maybe, right? Like if your app is trying out advertisements, which might be annoying for the user, that might be a really bad moment to ask for ratings because there's more intent to place a negative rating, for example. Could also mean that you're doing an A/B test where a certain new feature is enabled that might negatively impact the user experience. Maybe you shouldn't ask ratings at that moment, right? But it once again comes down to the fact, like, how likely is it that if you show the rating pop-up, do you get a positive rating or not? But I would say there's never a reason to not ask for ratings if the outcome is likely to be positive, right?
Absolutely. I mean, 400 to 12,000. Always, always, always ask.
Yeah.
I was an ASO conference a few years ago, and someone gave a talk about getting more ratings. Even back then, they knew that ratings were important for a game, and they had a little clever trick for asking for a rating. So in Apple world, you're not allowed to say, if you give me a 5-star rating, I'll give you coins in the game or something else. That will get you rejected. But you can hope that people have that sense and incentivize them before. So what they did was, I forgot what game this was, I wrote about it at some point, but their clever idea was that they give you coins and then they ask for the rating. So it's reverse. And they said that it worked amazingly well. So people were incentivized to do that. And that's actually extremely legal. So that obviously only works for a certain type of app, a certain type of experience. But the idea that you should push for it and you should repeatedly kind of make the gesture, I think that works. And someone in the chat actually noticed that when I asked for people to thumbs up the video, our likes doubled instantly.
Yeah, but this is psychological, right? Like, if I want, well, this is a very bad example, and I hope my fiance isn't listening. But if I want my fiance to clean up the room, for example,
we'll cut this out of the video later.
Okay, perfect. But if I tell her, "Can you clean up?" She's like, "Why would I? Why don't you do it?" Right? But if I tell her, like, "Okay, I'm gonna clean up my room and I'm gonna clean up my shoes and stuff. Would you mind cleaning up the room?" Then I'm doing two things, and she only needs to do one thing, right? Like, so I already create a positive intent to do something, which is kind of the same if you give credits to somebody. Somebody feels like, "Oh man, I got the credits for free. I should do something back for him," you know, like, and then you ask for a rating. The intent is more likely to be positive. Yeah, so it's a very good idea actually, and maybe I should explore this further. I didn't do much with it yet.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also another thing. There's always something to optimize until you're really getting a new rating from every single download. So, yeah, those are really great. A few more things from the chat came in. Someone said that be careful with incentivizing because the App Store review team doesn't really like it. And I completely agree. Do not incentivize in a way that's super obvious. That's just cheesy. And also, a warning, do not buy ratings. Antoine and I talked about this just before the show, and it's so easy to say, well, if ratings will help me get more visibility on the App Store, I should definitely pay for them, because you go on Google today and you search for ratings for the App Store and you'll find them, and they're cheap. They're very cheap. Do not buy them. Do not succumb to this, because if you get penalized, you're going to be in a heck of a lot of trouble that you can't really undo by paying the exact same amount. The 20, 30, 50 bucks that you pay for a whole thousands of ratings are not going to help you. And when they drop off, your app is going to disappear. So that's my warning.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it either way, right? Like you're building an app for your own proud in a way as well, especially if it's in India. And I don't know, I can't be proud of my app if I see 1,000 ratings, but I know that I bought them. It's just like an Instagram account with bought likes and stuff, right? On top of that, if my app is bad performing and users have a reason to place a bad rating, I want to know. I want to see that, and I want to have an overview and use that as a valuable source. Improve it, and then reply back to them like, hey, I saw that you placed a negative rating, which often comes with a written review. Can you retry and maybe update your rating, right? Like, I think that's a much nicer approach and makes you much more proud as well. If you like that as well, just like me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, and I guess that's also a good point to a nice reminder that if you are optimizing your ratings, you're not just helping the algorithm see you, you're helping people, because people see a higher average, people see a higher count. Would you download an app that has 400 ratings or an app that has 12,000 ratings?
Yeah, it doesn't win anything, right? Like if you have like 1,000 positive ratings, people open your app and it's crap in a way. Yeah, what do you win? Like, okay, you got an extra install, but that's it in a way.
Exactly. And that can, on the Google Play side of things, that actually hurts a lot if people download your app and then immediately delete it. That really kills your momentum. Apple doesn't really care about that as much, even though I've heard some other things recently. But if not now, in the future will be. So it's not something you want. Yeah. Google really cares about deletions. So if you have, and you can see this also in your Appfigures account, you can overlay downloads and deletions. And if you see that it's moving in parallel, you're in trouble, and you're probably not getting enough visibility anyway. So you probably are pushing with ads, and something is just not working. And a lot of the times, it really has to do with you misrepresenting the app, whether it's through App Store optimization, or by buying ratings, or by buying ads, or by doing something that leads people to believe this is the app for me, and it isn't. So
this is crucial, right? Like I'm thinking about WeTransfer right now, which opens directly a login screen, and if you don't have an account, you kind of drop off. Unless you create an account. But with this in mind, I truly believe we should revisit that and create an anonymous workflow, right? Like,
absolutely. So in our app, what we did to kind of skip that whole thing is we created a whole demo account. And with the demo account, you can just see the Appfigures app, the mobile Appfigures app, in action, mess around with it, not with your data, obviously, or not with anyone's data, with some demo data that we invented. And it made everything significantly easier, because every time we tell someone, hey, check out the Appfigures, I'll be like, oh, I don't want to log in. I want to make an Appfigures account if I don't know you yet. But like, oh, you don't have to. Just click the demo button. It's huge.
Smart.
And people love that. Also easier to get through app review because you don't have to give them credentials.
Hey,
but that's tiny change. So let's see, what else do we have in the chat? There's a lot of stuff going on in the chat. Let me bring up the chat on the screen so more people can see what's going on. So we have a question from Chris, who's asking, do ratings older than 30 days count for the algorithm? So from what I know, the answer is most likely no. The 30-day is a number that I settled on because I noticed that over looking at thousands of keywords, that's usually what makes the most sense. Some people say it's a little bit shorter. Some people take ranges that are a tiny bit longer. But ultimately, 30 days is really a decent average to look at. So most of the keywords that I look at can be explained with a 30-day number of ratings. And again, not the average, but rather the count. So that's a question answered. Let's see what else we have in the chat. Ooh, Maurice is asking a great question. So Maurice is asking, what is a good downloads to ratings ratio? This is a question I get all the time after I introduce this metric. I don't remember when exactly. Today we published episode 67 of Keyword Teardowns, and I think it was somewhere in the 30s. So over the last 30 weeks, I've been getting this same question almost weekly. And the answer is there isn't any. The ratio is really as good as you can get it versus your competitors. Some apps work better at extracting ratings. Some flows work better at extracting ratings. And at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have an absolute number that you can say, I'm getting 100% of downloads to turn into ratings. I guess that could be the best case scenario, but that's an unreasonably unrealistic number. So this is really an important point, and that is your number should be higher than your competitors. That's really, and the higher it is, the better it is, because it means that with fewer downloads, you will get more ratings, so you will be able to jump ahead. And if we're going advanced on ASO, we can say that the higher this ratio is versus the competition, the more competitive power you have, so you can battle on more competitive keywords that are higher popularity. So it's kind of a snowball in reverse, or reverse. One of those two. That's how it works. I would recommend to everyone to just go right now into Keyword Inspector and look at the number, the actual number of new ratings versus the download estimates if you have a Grow plan that gives you access to download estimates. And if you don't, you should, because knowing that is really important. And doing that, you can easily see how different apps are doing. And I've seen apps that have a very low ratio, meaning they get a ton of downloads and just a handful of ratings, and they really suffer because of it. And so that would be my suggestion for you. Go and check it out and benchmark it against your competitors, not as an absolute number. That's my spiel. I talked for a while. Let's see what else we have in the chat.
I'm learning a lot as well today, to be honest. And I guess that's good to know as well for listeners. You know, you're never too old to learn and never too experienced to learn. It's really good.
Yeah, that's I learned a lot from the chat too. Sometimes I get ideas that I did not believe even. We've had people who told me about experiences that they had. We have some really good comment threads in some of these videos that happen later about stuff that Apple said and stuff that actually works. For example, someone suggested, this is about a year ago, that Apple is now reading the keywords from screenshots, which I don't necessarily believe. I have not seen in practice. I was hoping that would be the case years ago, but that's not at all the case. And they swore that this is what Apple told them. So I'm still constantly looking for a way to prove this, which is interesting.
I would believe so now, right? Like with all the new features in iOS 16 and 15 as well, with you know, like the easy way of getting keywords out of screenshots and such, it kind of makes sense. But I would say less impactful in a way, but because it's less intended by the one uploading the screenshots probably as of now, but that might change as well.
Yeah, I kind of believe that can happen. The capabilities are obviously there. I mean, what you can do now with extracting text from images on an iPhone is just incredible. I've used it so many times, not even realizing that it's this new cool thing. So it is beautiful. But at the same time, is it being used? I have not seen it in action, but that's something I learned from the chat. So that's good. And we can have a whole conversation on how to use reviews to learn about your app and competitors, but that's for a whole different day.
Regarding this, we should probably try out like a page optimization in App Store Connect, where we just use the same screenshots, but we change the words and see how it affects the ranking of the app. It could be interesting to see what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only one problem with that. You have to actually do a time test, not an A/B test, because Apple doesn't consider anything in an A/B test for App Store optimization. Google's the same way. But I might be working on something like that. More about that later. A question from Yassine in the chat that I'm just putting on the screen now. What do you think of first displaying a prompt saying something like, do you like the app, before displaying Apple's prompt in order to minimize negative ratings? A question we answered 15 or so minutes ago. But what were your thoughts, the summary of the previous thoughts?
Yeah, I think the important part here is, once again, that you kind of like leverage the fact that you can prevent taking any of the 3 times that you have per year to show the actual rating pop-up, right? So yeah, you're more in control. And I guess in a way, if you time the pop-up right, and I didn't tell that before, so this might be an advanced answer. If the user decides to say no, but most likely the user has time to place a rating, you could maybe leverage that moment and ask the user, like, what do you not like? Which is different when the app launches and you ask for it and people press no, because that moment, they want to use your app instead of do something else that they didn't come from.
Yeah, that's very true. You know what I wonder, just thinking randomly right now, I wonder if how you allow for that pop-up, your own custom pop-up, to be closed, if that makes a difference between people just closing it versus people saying, no, I don't like the app, because they're kind of angry that they can't find the little X.
Yeah, but that's another thing you want to try out, right? Like that pre-pop-up can be quite impactful in the rest of the flow. Whether it's like just an overlay pop-up, whether it's a sheet or maybe a full screen model. I guess those are all kind of like things you want to try out and optimize using A/B tests.
Yeah, and again, touching on the idea of experimenting with different things and measuring the impact, that's 100% required, I would say. And it doesn't even take that long. I think a lot of people think that when we say you got to test stuff, it's like, oh, now I gotta start an experiment. What is an experiment? How do I start an experiment? How do I end it? What do I do when it ends? And none of that is actually complicated. Also, none of that really matters at the end of the day, because all you have to do is make a change and measure what happened after a certain amount of time. And if you do that with ratios as opposed to absolute numbers, you're going to mitigate most of the challenges that come with A/B testing, and why A/B testing dips into statistics and becomes a little bit more kind of harder to wrap your head around in the beginning if you've never done it. How do you usually test?
Yeah, so I just want to briefly give a short tip, right? Like, people often think that you need a third-party library or something to do A/B testing and such. But if you want to benefit from a tracking implementation that you most likely already have in place, you can also do a local variant assignment. So you basically randomly assign a variant for the user, and based on that, you show a different pop-up. And then you basically create 2 tracking events, right? Like rating placed variant A, rating placed variant B. It's a super simple implementation, and it might not be as effective as those advanced tools, but I'm pretty sure that this is much more easy to implement, and it also gives you some insights, at least, into how your app is performing.
Absolutely, and I think the more advanced you get with things like A/B testing, and the more you try to slice your demographics and you try to figure out who's using the app more, who's using the app less, you're just going to spend more time analyzing the results. In most cases, a normal random is enough because it's the least biased possible. You're not asking for anything. You're not trying to make sense of who the user is. All you're doing is just saying, this is a user. And I think that's the easiest, but also the simplest. If you have enough users, enough traffic in your app, that's the way to go about it, in my opinion. So it's easy and it's fun.
Totally. Yeah, it's another addiction that I have working at WeTransfer. We have a lot of experiments running and looking at like the outcome, like, did I improve that statistic or not? It's super exciting.
That's exactly what it's all about. You do that, and I think the more you iterate on it, the easier it becomes to understand how important it is, which is how I got started with A/B testing. When we started with A/B testing, I would test one thing, maybe one button, one flow, one pop-up, and now we have A/B tests on pretty much everything, on buttons and on flows and on email subjects. There was a time where every email I would send had an A/B test built into it. Now I scaled it down a little bit so I can use other features of email sending, but it's incredibly useful.
And it's a nice feeling in a way, right? Like, it just runs out there and it just does something, and you don't have to do anything about it anymore, but you will get like a present of new insights in a way. I don't know. So that's how it feels to me, at least.
Absolutely. And I always think about it this way. I know a lot of things and I can think well about a lot of things, but I'm not going to be right about all the things. It's just impossible, whether it's an email subject or a color of a button or the timing of a pop-up. I'm going to mess up. With A/B testing, I'm going to mess up half the time for a little bit and then never. So it's a kind of a safety net, the way I see it, that allows me to not have to always worry about, did I do this wrong? Did I do this wrong? Kind of a win-win.
Yeah, and your assumptions are based on what you're used to, right? Like, it could be completely different in a different culture.
Yep.
So that's I guess if you really want to take this further with the rating optimization and such, you should even look into like how is your puppet performing per country and see whether a certain culture affects how it performs, copy or colors and those kind of things.
That's absolutely true. We had someone who is running screenshot optimization A/B tests for Google on the Safe Chat about a year ago. And he was saying basically the same thing. So what works in the US does not work in the UK, even though both are English-speaking countries. So even with the same language, well, similar language, I know, but even without that sort of a difference, the culture is still so different. So when you show a bus in the US and a bus in the UK, they're different buses. One is not going to excite as much as the other if they're flipped. And that was a pretty decent, eye-opening experience.
Yeah, I can imagine.
For testing. And it goes the same for ratings. And for when it comes to App Store optimization, ratings do matter at the country level. And so you kind of have to do that anyway. And that works. We have just a few more minutes. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is a question that I don't get often, but I got recently from a friend who was in a similar situation to yours. They had just a few ratings before, and their average was a little bit low because they went from a paid app to a free app with subscriptions, and some of the user base didn't like that. And they had a 3.7 average, I think, with a whole bunch of ratings, thousands of ratings. And he didn't like the 3.7. And that phase of people being very angry is now behind them. So I said, well, obviously, you got to reset your ratings. And he said, but what's going to happen? Am I going to get a higher rating? Am I going to get more ratings? Or only negative ratings going to be left? And I'm going to get even less than my 3.7. And I said, well, you have to look at your data. So we went into his Appfigures account, and in his Appfigures account, in every Appfigures account, in the ratings report, you can select only new ratings, and you see the number and you see the average. And I had to set it to a year, because he said if we had done it a year ago, if we would reset a year ago, how many ratings would we have? And he saw they would have, I think, 1,000 or 1,400 ratings with a 4.7 or 4.8 average. So when he asked me if he should reset or not, I said, well, I mean, look at the data. Are you willing to wait a year to get to above 1,000 ratings? And he said, absolutely. And now he's seriously considering resetting the ratings. Did you do something similar when you started messing around with ratings?
Yeah, data-driven decisions, right? Like that makes the lives a lot easier. Yeah, actually, we did reset the rating as well, because we kind of knew or assumed that we would be in a much better place either way from the get-go. Asking for much better ratings, and before we would only get negative ratings because that was the only intent users had, right? Like a negative experience, so they would place the rating, so the average was lower because the only people that replied had a negative experience. So yeah, the example numbers that I shared before, at the moment that we released the app version with the optimization for ratings, that was also the moment that we reset the ratings. I guess an important note to make here is that resetting the ratings doesn't remove bad written reviews or any written reviews.
Yep.
Right. It only removes the number of ratings or like the average rating, and it gets you set from zero. But yeah, I guess it depends as well on the number, right? Like if you had a lot of ratings already and it's negative, it's better probably to reset the rating than you just had like 20 ratings or something, and you're likely to get 1,000 with the optimization strategy that you implemented.
Yeah, I think one of the things that some people don't think about when they think about resetting the ratings and whether to do it or not is what's going to be the impact. And if you're thinking about not resetting the ratings, averaging a 3.7 with a 5, a new 5-star rating with a 3.7 average, it's going to take a lot of 5s to get you to 3.8, 3.9. And the more ratings you have, the worse it's going to get because it's an average. And one of your only tools is really to reset. Because when you reset, you start from scratch. And that's how things can actually grow. And I think if you hadn't reset when at that 400 mark, do you think you would be where you are today?
I think so, yeah, because like 400 ratings versus the 11,000 ratings.
I guess that's true, yeah.
So that's a big difference. True. Yeah, but like we didn't optimize before, and we were going to optimize, so it was quite obvious that the chances are higher that we would get a positive rating. So we had no reason to think that if we reset the rating, we will get a lower average rating afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So the chances were much higher to get a higher rating. So it was quite logic for us to get rid of that bad sentiment in a way.
Yeah, I think that's if you think about it that way, you can always win, pretty much.
Yeah.
Two good questions from the chat that I'm going to bring up on the screen. So Chris is asking, do reviews count for the algorithm as well? Sometimes people rate the app without writing a review, and from my experience, reviews are not what counts. It's really about the ratings themselves. Now, interesting thing, if you're on Google Play, the reviews do count because Google actually reads them and analyzes the keywords in reviews. I think it's a terrible idea, and I think that's how a lot of developers, especially games, really game the system. But that's Google. On the App Store, it does not. And then another question from Yassine is, can ratings be reset per country? And the answer is no. Ratings can only be reset as ratings as total for the app, which is another interesting aspect to this. Your ratings are your app's ratings, the total, but really it's a per store rating. And so when you go into the App Store, the user sees the ratings in their country. They don't see all of the ratings because all the ratings don't really matter, which is a very interesting bit. Google, again, is doing some really strange stuff with ratings. They're trying to make ratings the kind of thing you don't think about. You just somehow intuitively think works, even though it doesn't. But on the Apple side, things are very clear. So if you do have a problem with one country, like Antoine said before, A/B test maybe around that country, try to figure out why they lean more negative, and then reset the rating so everyone is happy. Have you had this sort of issue where one country was more negative than the others?
I do remember that we had some discussions about it. Yeah. I guess I can't really recall what it was, but I can tell how we would approach it, right? So an example could be that in the case of WeTransfer, we send a lot of large files, and it could be that a country with a worse networking condition has a worse user experience. So the rating could be an indication for us to look at, like, how are we able to optimize the networking performance by leveraging different download service or upload service nearby that country, right? And based on that optimization, we can re-look at the ratings and see if it optimizes. But so far we're pretty good. Yeah, it's also not that we just started a company, so we got that optimization far behind us, I guess. But I guess that's an example of how you can look at the impact of countries on your rating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in your case, it's definitely interesting because you do have something that works differently by country and has a meaningful or immediate impact. So that could also be a positive because, and this is an interesting one, I don't know who your direct competitors are exactly, but if you read their reviews and you see which countries people are complaining the most from, you can optimize for those countries and you'll probably beat them on ASO and have users who are dissatisfied come over to your app. Advanced ASO stuff. Advanced.
Yeah, no, it's a very good tip. I hope Julia, my colleague, is listening. We're going to start App Store optimization pretty soon. We didn't do much for it yet, unfortunately. But yeah,
you left all the opportunity for later.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm ready to learn now.
Everyone, speaking of learning, if we've learned anything today is that you have to ask for ratings. So I'm going to ask one more time. Let's double those likes again. If you like the video, if you're here, you've been here for an hour, give this video a like. It's down somewhere over there. I don't know which side of the screen I'm in anymore. So easy thumbs up. I'm going to keep an eye on those likes.
I like now as well. I didn't do previously, but I like it now. Yeah.
Okay. We got buy-in from the guest. I think now you know we're doing it. So that's great. We're going to be done in about a minute or two. If you have any last minute questions, drop them in the chat right now. And is there anything else that you want to bring up, Antoine, that you think would be helpful to the audience as they optimize?
Well, I guess part of the reason that I'm sitting here is that we had a discussion about an article that I wrote. So if you're building a Swift application and you're looking for kind of like a ready to implementation and copy and paste it right into your app, go check out my article. I'm pretty sure we'll link to the article in the description. Other than that, yeah, really start looking into optimizing this flow, because I truly believe that it will help your app grow.
I think that's a good point. Definitely go and read it. It kickstarted a lot of things, so we're gonna link to it in really all the places. And something interesting from the chat. So we ran a poll just a few moments ago and asked if people are going to go make changes to their apps now that they've heard us talk. And the winning answer is yes, with an exclamation mark. 62% as of right now of people, of viewers who responded to this will go and make some changes. And that is incredible. I love that we can get people to this point where they feel comfortable making changes. That's really what I always try and do. And the more we can make this very easy, and as you've seen, I mean, you write about this, so you know how important it is to introduce people to this. The better it is. So I think that's how we all win. So
totally couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much it for us. Thank you, Antoine. This was a pleasure. We can continue this for like 4 hours. So if you want to see us do this again, drop a comment in the chat or a comment later when the chat closes. Let us know if you want to see us talking about ratings or reviews, and we can go really advanced, but that's for later. Again, thank you for being here. This was a pleasure. This was so much fun, and I would love to do it again. And thank you, everyone, for asking questions, interacting on the chat, and hitting that like button. And if you haven't already, you should do it now, just like the last second of this video. And that's pretty much all I have for you today. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Again, this was great. We will see you again in a few weeks to talk about App Store optimization, and soon enough to talk about subscriptions and Apple search ad optimization. Yep, that's on the to-do list. Alrighty, that's it for me. Thank you again, Antoine. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, night, afternoon, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.